my vets would never go to the media. They would come to the team. My vets didn't pick and choose when they wanted to bring it. They brought it every time they stepped in the gym, whether it was practice or a game. They didn't take days off. My vets didn't care about their numbers. My vets played for the team. When we lost, they wouldn't blame us. They took responsibility and got in the gym. They showed the young guys what it meant to work. Even in Boston, when we had the best record in the league, if we lost a game, you could hear a pin drop on the bus. They showed us the seriousness of the game. My vets didn't have an influence on the coaching staff. They couldn't change the plan because it didn't work for them. I played under one of the greatest coaches and he held everyone accountable. It takes 1 to 15 to win. When you isolate everyone, you can't win consistently. I may be a lot of things, but I'm not a bad teammate. My goal is to pass what I learned along. The young guys work. They show up. They don't deserve blame. If anything is questionable, it's the leadership.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. There's a lot of stuff to break down on today's show. We had the All-Star reserves announced. I'll give a quick little take on that. There was action from Thursday. There was action on the court and off the court. And then we'll preview a massive 10-game Friday in the NBA. So
let's get to it.
All right. Where should we start? Let's start with the All-Star reserves. I gave my All-Star reserves 2 days ago, so there was a couple of differences, 3 differences I believe between my All-Star reserves and the ones that the coaches picked. Paul Millsap for Joel Embiid in the Eastern Conference. I had Embiid in there. I can totally understand why they didn't vote for Embiid. I know the games played and the minutes. That really doesn't bother me at all. Okay, he hasn't played as many games. He hasn't played as many minutes. He's still been better in those times that he's played. So that, I understand the argument, and I've got no issue with Millsap. But Millsap has regressed fairly significantly this year. It's his worst season of his entire career in terms of his true shooting percentage. He's seen a lot of his advanced numbers dip this year. He is still a very good player, and I've got no issue with him being in there. I would have taken Embiid, as you know, but no issue with it. The Western Conference, I had, and you can talk about snubs. Chris Paul not being selected is ridiculous. Yes, he wasn't going to play the game, but he should have been selected. And then you can make a move to grab someone else. The commissioner can add the injury replacement. Chris Paul deserves to be in the All-Star game. That is ludicrous. That is a blindingly crazy omission. So I had Chris Paul in. I had Rudy Gobert in at the expense of Klay Thompson and DeAndre Jordan. Klay Thompson, I can understand. In no world could you tell me that Chris Paul deserves less to be in than Klay Thompson. No way that you can explain that to me. And no way that you can explain that DeAndre Jordan deserves to be in over Rudy Gobert. So those two are the two ones that feel crazy to me. I know that Jordan, he does what he needs to do, but I would say that his season this year has been worse than what he did last year in a lot of aspects. It's gotten better recently, but he didn't start off the season well. But Gobert's been fantastic, and I don't see that being the right decision. Let me know what you think about those reserves, but they're the differences that I had in my team, those 3 guys. And then if Chris Paul was out, I had Nik Jokic in there because, as you know, I'm a massive Jokic fan. And yes, he has played limited minutes, but the guy is leading the NBA in offensive efficiency, offensive rating. Rudy Gobert leads the NBA in defensive rating. I think that those 2 guys should have been in there. We'll talk about Jokic a little bit later on, but that was my discussion on the All-Star situation. The Bulls mess, I'll talk about that later when we get into DFS preview of the Bulls later on in the show, so check that out then. What we'll do now is we'll just head straight into the monstrous line of the night, because it is my boy, Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. He is also, of course, the young gun of the night. Jokic had 29 points, he had 14 rebounds, he had 8 assists, almost a triple-double. 1 steal, 2 blocks, 12 of 21 from the field, 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Is there anything this guy can't do at the moment? He's the number 5 ranked player over the last month. He's averaging 23 and 10.5 with 5 assists, a steal, a block, 0.8 threes on 60 and 85%. These are numbers that are ludicrous. He is playing at such an insane level at the moment these are the things that I expected from him. Probably not to this level. That'd be fair, not to this level, but I did expect him to be this good. And he's showing up some pretty good numbers. Now, the thing that you all want to hear now is what happened to him. He got hurt at the end of the game, what the Nuggets are calling a hip strain. And everyone, rightfully, panicked. Oh, this is terrible. It looks bad. He got up, he hobbled off the court, he went into the locker room, and I have an issue with one of the terms that the Nuggets announcers used. If you had been not watching the game or not watching the broadcast and you hear what he said, or you read a tweet of someone mentioning this is what he said, did you go, oh shit, that's bad? And the guy stand there, Nikola Jokic has just been carted into the locker room for scans. And you go, carted in? That sounds terrible. And then if you're watching it, you see his head come past, fully upright, on a wheelchair. Is that a cart? It's a wheelchair. That's just like, don't bother walking, man. Just sit down and we'll push you. They make it sound like he's on some sort of medivac. They've got him strapped in. They've got the paramedics there holding him on a legit medical cart. He was sitting in a wheelchair as he got pushed past. So when I saw that, I went, okay, maybe I'm not too bothered by this injury. I think he'll be all right. X-rays were negative. Great sign. MRI is scheduled for tomorrow, so we're going to find out more information on Nick Jokic's hip there, but every indication is that it's going to be fine. Will Barton came out and said, I'm glad he's okay. It's great for us. He's our best player. Everything looks fine. So I'll take that as a positive. His brothers, the Jokic brothers, were joking around with Michael Malone and Tim Connolly. They didn't seem to have any concerns. Jokic seemed to be in good spirits. There's reports that he just having his normal shower in the locker rooms, which is a weird report, but it is what it is. I think that you'll probably see him maybe miss a game. But it looks like we've avoided serious problems. But having a streaming spot on your roster can be useful. And that's where you go and add Jusuf Nurkic. And you go and say, all right, if Jokic misses 2 weeks, Nurkic is going to play 24 minutes a night. We're going to see some Darrell Arthur, we're going to see some One Show, we're going to see some Ken Fareed playing some extra minutes. But we're going to see Nurkic play 24, maybe 26 or 27, and that'll be useful for short term. I don't think that it's going to be necessary, but taking a move like that to insulate you, actually, not even insulate you, irrespective of whether you own Jokic or not, grabbing Nurkic might give you 2 wins over 2 weeks, potentially, and that might be enough to change the seeding, change your playoff aspirations, change all that stuff. So have a look if he's around, see who you're dropping, of course, as always, but if you've got that streaming spot, and then, you know what, if it doesn't work out, or not if it doesn't work out, if Jokic is fine, which is what we all hope, if Jokic is fine, then you say, well, thanks, Jusuf, it was nice for you to be on the team for a day. I'll see you later. And that's it. You don't lose anything because it was a streaming spot. But it feels like it's all positive news for Jokic at the moment, and not only his fantasy owners, everyone who's a fan of basketball in general should be happy with that news because he's fun. He's one of the most fun players in the NBA to watch. The Nuggets are fun when he's rolling. Everyone should want him out there putting up numbers and looking like an awesome, awesome talent, which is exactly what he is at the moment. But as for his performances, he's ridiculous, really. Let's look at his per 36 numbers for the last month. Because he's only playing 30 minutes a night. 28, 12.5, and 6. They're pretty good numbers. And that would put him as the 3rd best player in that time frame. He was almost going to get 36 minutes a night. He got 35 minutes and 46 seconds. He's had now 35 minutes in back-to-back games. His last 2 games have yielded 52 points, 25 rebounds, 14 assists, 3 steals, and 5 blocks. Of course, it's been back-to-back monstrous lines of the night for Jokic. He's going in the first round next year. I feel that he is going in the first round. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel that he's going to. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be the wrong move. Because if you can put up top 5 numbers, then you're a first round pick. Going to be a very, very interesting off-season and pre-season scenario to see exactly where Nikola Jokic happens to go. Of course, as I said, he is the young gun of the night as well. The waiver wire line of the night goes to his teammate, Jameer Nelson, who started in place of Emmanuel Mudiay and had 13, 4, and 9. He had 2 steals, he hit a 3, he had a block, and was 6 of 11 from the field. And this was a weird game for Nelson because it is the year 2017, and Jameer Nelson played 42 minutes in a non-overtime NBA basketball game. Jamal Murray, the first round pick, the number 7 pick, who really is a point guard, played 6 minutes. A very weird scenario there just in terms of that minutes distribution. But that's 2 good games in a row for Jameer. He scored 17 with 7 assists in the last one, and he was 13, 4, and 9 in this game. As long as Moutier remains out, Nelson is a fine short-term stopgap. The first game that Moutier was out, he wasn't quite as successful, but he had 9 points in 28 minutes. Still not bad. But the last 2 games have been great. And as long as Moutier is out, there's no issue with owning Nelson and getting those numbers out of him until Manny returns. Now, Moutier might be back in the next game, and that's probably what it's looking like at this point. But there's no harm in saying, I need a point guard. Nelson could be that guy who's a top 80 guy for as long as Moutier remains out. I'm fine with it. You get those numbers and you work the absences of other players to your advantage. And that's, again, why a streaming spot is important because, some of the time it might be, who's this piece of crap that I'm grabbing off the waiver wire? But some of the time it'll be, okay, I've got this guy for 3 games and he's top 80 for 3 games. And then move on. Grab the next guy who's top 80 for 3 games. Grab the next guy. And that can really, really get your team moving along very, very nicely. And that's exactly the way that, in the majority of cases, you should be looking to build squads. The dud of the night goes to Derek Favors of the Utah Jazz. Favors had 8 and 6 with 3 assists, but it's his minutes that are the real pain in the ass here for what Derek is doing. Just 22 minutes in this game. The last time he exceeded 30 minutes was back on the 14th of January against Orlando. In fact, he's just exceeded 30 minutes twice in 2017. This was coming off a pretty good game from Derek, though. The last game he had 18 and 5 in 25 minutes. The game before he had 10 and 10. But the reluctance of Quinn Snyder to play Favors down the stretch is troublesome. They're running with Boris Diaw down the stretch. I think if they're going to go without Favors, I'd want them to play with their wings and play Gordie Hayward at the 4, and then get Rod Hood, get Georgie Hill, get Joe Ingles, get Alec Burks, get any of those other guys out there if you're going to go small. But I don't think putting Boris Diaw out there is the answer. Favors has been a disappointment this year. He's the 197th ranked player. And his numbers are coming up a bit, averaging 26 minutes over the last month, but not enough to make you say, I feel great hope. Now, I still feel decent hope for him, but it's eroding pretty quickly, especially when I see the way that Snyder is using him and running those rotations late in the game and giving these minutes to Boris Diaw. It's a real bother to me with Derek. And if I'm in an 8-team league, I don't think I'd bother with Favors. If I'm in a 10-team league, I probably still would, but if your league has got 6 playoff teams and you're in 7th, or you're in 8th, you might have to consider moving on. It's not a decision that you should make lightly, but it is something that you can that you should consider. And sometimes these hard decisions have to be made, and you have to just not necessarily bite the bullet, but I guess bite the bullet and say, well, Snyder's just not giving it to him, and if he gives it to him in March, that's fantastic, but I can't wait that long. You can wait through November, December a lot of the time, but now you're talking about fantasy playoffs starting for some leagues in 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. And do we expect him to get back to 30 minutes in that time? I'm losing hope in a big way of that happening. And I've been a big Derek Favors supporter for the season, but at some point you just have to say, well, nothing's changing. And you hope it changes, but at this point, it just doesn't feel like it is. He did have 2 good games prior to this one, so I'm not going too over the top, and I would personally hold him. But my confidence is eroding, most definitely. All right, let's move on now to the games. We'll talk about them in that little bit of extra detail as we like doing. The first one of those games that we're going to talk about is the Dallas Mavericks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Mavericks were without Darren Williams. They were without Jose Juan Barea. I always want to say JJ Barea's name, but as Jose Juan, I always want to say, but it's Juan Jose. No, now I've confused myself. Regardless, JJ. No Darren Williams, no JJ Barea, no Dirk Nowitzki, no Wes Matthews. So we're talking about 4 of their best 6 players potentially being out. The Mavericks trotted out a starting lineup that initially included Devin Harris, and then right on lock time for DFS games, actually like about 30 seconds after lock time, they made a switch and said, nah, sorry, Pierre Jackson's coming in. Now, initially we thought Jackson was going to be the starter. That's the way that we'd projected it. And then there was a late switch about 40 minutes, or not late switch, there was an announcement 40 minutes beforehand saying that Devin Harris was going to start. Okay, And then they made the switch back to Pierre Jackson. And Jackson looked good. 13 minutes for Pierre. 9 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists until he did his hammy. Once the hammy pinged, he was done. He was done for the day. And Jackson's on a 10-day contract. He might get another 10-day, but you have to think that this hamstring injury didn't look great. And he's going to miss weeks, so I can't really see them giving him another 10-day. So any short-term value that he had is just twinged, just like that hamstring just did. Dorian Finney-Smith also got the start. He played 41 minutes DFS, 11, 5, and 2, with 2 triples, 4 steals, and a block. That is a fantastic line. It's a great line. But we've seen this story from Finney-Smith plenty of times this season. He'll go out there and have this game where he hits some threes and gets some steals, and you go, shit, the minutes are good, the production's good. Like, what do I do with this guy? And then he has 2 points in 35 minutes with 1 rebound and 0 steals. And you go, okay. That's why I don't grab him. So I'm not reading much into this with Finney-Smith. He's a 20-teamer, 18-teamer maybe. But when everyone's back, and it's a big chunk of guys that are back, and Dirk will be back next game, Wes will be back pretty soon. We don't know about Darren Williams' timetable. When those guys are back, we're going to see Finney-Smith down to 16 minutes or so. So it's not even going to have any real use in even 16-team leagues long term. The Pencil had 31 points in his 39 minutes, as is what he always does, not much else. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal for Harrison Barnes. Great efficiency, though, 13 of 26, and he has been a surprise to a lot of people. His fantasy upside is always limited by his limited ability to get those other numbers, but the scoring has been fantastic for him. Seth Curry played 34 minutes. He had a great opportunity here to go big, Seth. Couldn't. And I think this is just sort of where he is a guy that you own, and you should own him at the moment while these players are out, but he just can't seem to get big lines going. 11 points with 4 assists and 3 triples is fine. A steal, nice numbers. Own them. But don't think that we're going to be getting a massive Seth Curry breakout coming second half of the season, because he's getting consistent minutes, and this is what he's putting up. Like these numbers that are back end of your roster, which is, of course, useful, but everyone coming back is going to cut into this. I love what I've seen from Justin Anderson. Now, you should know, or maybe you don't, because I was pretty big on Justin Anderson last season at draft time, and thought he could be a real useful player. I was pretty excited to see what he could bring this year. I thought that they looked at him as their starting small forward of the future and run with a point guard, Wes Matthews, Justin Anderson, Harrison Barnes, and center lineup. That would be the way they'd want to run things when Dirk retires. But Anderson has been firmly in the doghouse for the majority of this season. By the last few games, really stepping up. 17 and 5 with 3 triples here. He's a wing who blocks shots, who can hit threes, and he's hitting them at a decent rate again now. He's a 40% shooter at Virginia. He's hitting his threes again. He can score, he can rebound, and he had a really good run in place of Chandler Parsons at the end of last season, just being completely buried this year. In a dynasty league, I do really think that in the next 2 years he's going to be putting up top 120 numbers. I do think that'll happen because he has got a fairly nice skill set. The threes and blocks as a wing guy is a nice combination, and he's just been buried this year. This is a time that you can try and buy him from someone in a dynasty league and hope, and I'm actually in the middle of negotiations in a dynasty league to try and acquire him. So Kevin, if you're listening, you know I want him, and we're so close to getting that deal done, Kevin. Let's push it through. Just give me that draft pick and we're done, and we'll get Justin Anderson coming back to my team. But he is putting up some good numbers over these last couple of games. It obviously hasn't been sustainable for the majority of the season because he hasn't really seen enough playing time, but good stuff here, and it should give you some hope. Dwight Powell was basically invisible. Rick Carlisle is not a Dwight Powell fan at this point, and he sees him only as a center. So he was playing as a third-string center, basically behind Bogut and Salah Mejri. With Dirk out, he was running Justin Anderson at the 4, and he was running the Pencil at the 4. They were the guys. You weren't seeing Dwight Powell there, and that's fine. I like Dwight Powell. I just don't know how good he can be as a center. His defense as a center is a worry, and that really limits what he can do fantasy-wise long-term. For the Thunder, Russ didn't have a triple-double, but he scored 45. He had 8 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, and the most important thing I think here is an unexpected boost to your field goal percentage. Like when Russ has a shit night in field goal percentage, you feel it. But he has a big night like this where he went 16 of 29. That's 55% on 29 shots. It's an unexpected bump for your field goal percentage. So a big night from Westbrook. Vic Oladipo has been very solid. For all the talk about him being dreadful to start the year, he's back in business as a top 40 sort of guy over the last couple of weeks. 17, 3, and 3 with 3 steals for Oladipo. And big Steve Adams couldn't get the hat trick of games with 4 block shots. Had 0 here, but 15 and 7 was nice. Now the big story from the Thunder is Enes Kanter, who has fractured his forearm punching a chair. You can make jokes about it. That's fine. It's as easy a target as there is, really, to make a joke about this guy being a dickhead and punching a chair. Fine. But let's look at it from a fantasy point of view and an analytic point of view. Woj is reporting he's out for 2 months. I initially estimated 2 months. Woj has gone harder, so it must be a significant problem that they're going to have to deal with surgery-wise. Get rid of him. You've got no IR. You can't hold on to him for 2 months. You can't. Just move on. There's no way he's coming back in a month anyway. But if it's 2 months, forget it. Now, the immediate question is always who benefits? Who's the must grab? And I reckon in 60 to 65% of cases in the NBA, the answer is no one. No one is necessarily a must add because they spread it out. There's no other player who is Enes Kanter in the NBA who can do what he did, because if there was, then he'd be doing that. So to actually replace his value, they're going to have to spread it out. It's going to be Domantas Sabonis, who played 29 minutes here and had 10 and 5. It's going to be Jeremy Grant, who went 2 and 7 in his 22 minutes. It's going to be Joffrey Laverne, who had 3 points in 7 minutes. You're going to see guys like maybe Andre Robertson play at the 4 a little bit more and get some Kyle Singler in there, which again happened. You might see some Nick Collison. All in all, there's nothing exciting. Now, Sabonis has started every game this year. Every game that he's played, he started. But he's like ranked outside the top 270. His per 36 numbers are not exciting at all. They're in the same sort of range. Usage has to go somewhere. It can't really go to Russ because he can't get a usage of 50%. It's going to go to Vic. It's going to go to Adams. It's going to go to guys like Cameron Payne. It's going to go to guys like Laverne, like Abrines. It's going to go to those players. But it's not going to happen in big enough quantities to make them automatic must-grabs. Sabonis is a guy that I would grab in a 16-team league, and I'd consider it in a 4-team, but I probably wouldn't. And the other guy's Grant is just a block specialist. That's all he'll do. Laverne, I can't look, unless I like Laverne. I think he can be a useful player, but going by what we've seen, he just won't get out there and play 25 minutes a night, which is what he'd need to even come close to 12-team value. So, as is in a lot of the cases, there's no absolute must-own player in this sort of scenario. The next game we'll talk about, let's move on to that one. It is the Indiana Pacers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jeff Teague.
My name is Jeff.
Almost triple-double, Jeff. 35 minutes, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists, a steal, a block, 3 triples, and 7 of 13 shooting. Fantastic nights. He is up and down at the moment, Teague, but he's been much better than I anticipated over these last 2 months. Miles Turner also scored over 20 points, as did Paul George. 23 and 6 in 36 minutes for Miles with 2 blocks, while Paul George had 32 points in his 55% shooting, had 5 assists and 4 rebounds as well. And George is a guy that I've mentioned plenty of times. It looks like he's having a disappointing season, and I would say that he is, and I'm not a big Paul George fan, as you know, but he absolutely deserved his All-Star spot, and he hasn't been as disappointing as what you might think. When you look at his numbers, they're fine. They're exactly what you should expect for a guy that you picked at the beginning or the middle of the second round. He's fine. There's no issues with it whatsoever. CJ Miles started 9 points. They all came from threes in 29 minutes, 6 boards and a steal. Really hard to consider him a 12-team league guy, but we know what he can do. He gets steals, he hits threes, and that can be useful in the right setting. Thad Young was piss poor with his offense, 9 points, but man, 3 steals again. This guy just gets steals and steals and steals, and he is really a steal specialist at this point, putting up ridiculous numbers. And Monte Ellis, he's still owned in 52% of leagues. I've got no idea what's going on there. 0 points, 1 rebound in 14 minutes for Monte. Missed all 6 of his shots. He's not starting again in the NBA. It's just not happening unless multiple injuries go down. He's not starting. You can move on if for some reason you are still holding on to Monte Ellis in a 12-team league. I pray that you're not. But if you are, move on. For the Wolves, Zach LaVine bounced back 42 minutes, 23, 3 and 5, a steal and a block with 3 triples. Wasn't efficient, but did get the scoring going. He was 7 of 17 from the field, and that's welcome news for his owners, or the ones that didn't ridiculously panic and drop him after this little stretch, which did happen. Karl Anthony Towns, 33 and 10, 4 assists, 2 steals. A huge night from Towns. He also added 4 triples as well on 6 attempts, and he has been rolling. If you grabbed him in the first round, this is the value you're getting now. You're getting first round value from Towns, and continues to shoot at ridiculous percentages. And by ridiculous, I just mean consistently 56 every night, which for a centre is maybe not what you consider ridiculous, but he stretches it out. He can hit threes. And that was basically what was holding him back from being that first round player for the first 2 months of the season. Rick Rubio, just the 4 points, but 12 assists and 4 steals gets it done for you, while Gorgie Jeng did it defensively, 2 steals, 2 blocks with 9 rebounds. And Andy Wiggins, 39 minutes, 21 points, but 17 shots, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and just his usual good scoring but middling production otherwise. It's still just a frustrating player. Shabazz Muhammad only saw 20 minutes for 8 points in this one, as we saw Jeng get some extra run and Wiggo play quite a lot here in this matchup. Let's move on to the next game now. The Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets. TJ Warren, we've been waiting a while for this to happen. 41 minutes for TJ, 21 and 8 with 1 3 and 1 block. But as I've posited plenty of times, that Warren's production seems to be inversely proportional to what Bledsoe does. Now, Bledsoe only played 28 minutes in this game. He saw foul trouble, and then Brandon Knight played well, and that enabled Warren to go off. Now, I have been fairly staunchly in the let's hold TJ Warren camp. I wavered a little bit recently and said, you know what, I understand that there's frustration here. The PJ Tucker being played over him or in preference to him, or Warren being frozen out of action has been frustrating. But his upside is top 50. Now, I wouldn't be buying a huge amount into this production thinking, yeah, he's fully back. The Bledsoe thing is definitely something I want to watch as to how they act together. But it was a good sign, and it was a good step in the road to recovery. Devin Booker's killing it at the moment, 24 points with 6 assists and a steal, and again, he did it on great shooting. He was 9 of 17 from the field, but only 1 of 6 from the from the 3-point line. So that's a pretty good performance there. Now, Booker was a guy that I was critical of earlier in the season, saying that he's not a good shooter. And as you know, and plenty of you attacked me for, saying, oh, he's young. He will be a good shooter. And I had never doubted that. I said I think he will be a good shooter, but he never was, until he proved to me at any point in his NBA career that he actually could shoot, which he never did. Well, now I feel okay. He's a good shooter. He's shooting 46% from 3 over the last month. His field goal percentage has jumped right back up. And you can say that he's a good shooter now because we've got evidence that he's a good shooter. We never had any evidence before, but now here it is, and he's putting up good numbers, and he's got his assists over 3 per game for the year. He's got his steals up to 1 a game, and they're the things he needs to do if he wants to be known as a perennial top 40 type fantasy player. The scoring's fine. He scored over 20 in 11 straight games. Get your percentage up, keep it at 45, get to the line, dish those 3 to 4 assists, get 1 to 1.5 steals, hit 2.5 threes, and you're going to have that value. But what he was doing prior to that was a guy that was outside the top 100 for the first month or so of the year, but he has really turned that around and is looking good. Tyson Chandler only saw 23 minutes because why wouldn't you just completely change everything that you do? Chandler's been getting like 33, 34 minutes a night. This game, no foul trouble, 23. 4 and 5 with 3 steals for Chandler, while Alex Len had 4 points in his 11 minutes. So they went without these guys playing center for big chunks of the time. We got 1 minute of Alan Williams. We had 8 minutes of Marquise Chris. Just a very small matchup a lot of the times here. We had lots of PJ Tucker, lots of Brandon Knight. In fact, the highest minutes players for the Suns, the 5 highest minutes guys were Warren, Knight, Booker, Eric Bledsoe, and PJ Tucker. The tallest guy out of that group is PJ Tucker. So PJ Tucker was basically the center for big chunks of this game. Now, Chandler should still be owned in all leagues. Marquise Chris cannot keep out of foul trouble. It's a real issue for him. We also had a Jared Dudley sighting, so he is alive after that illness, so don't worry there. And Brandon Knight, I'm getting the questions, do I add Brandon Knight? Well, we've seen him do this a handful of times this year. 17 points in 29 minutes, but it came on 8 of 11 shooting. And if there's one thing we know about Earl Watson, he does not believe in processes. He does not believe in sticking to convictions. If Brandon Knight hits a couple of shots in a row, oh man, you're good now. You're good. Just play. Go out there. You can play as many minutes as you want and take every shot in the world. which is results-based philosophy, not process-driven philosophy, which is stupid. Because that's fine, and it worked out for him here. They lost, but it worked out. But yeah, changing your entire situation up because Brandon Knight got hot doesn't work for me. As for PJ Tucker, 39 minutes, 11 points with 3 triples. He's more a 14-team league sort of a player, in my opinion. For the Nuggets, talked about a couple of their blokes already. Farton Will Barton had 16 points and 4 assists in his 25 minutes. Nice night, but it came on red-hot shooting. So I would be looking at him as a 14-teamer, while Ken Fareed the same. 63% shooting for 15 and 6 in 21 minutes. If Jokic was to miss, I would imagine that Fareed gets some extra minutes and plays as the backup center, as well as playing power forward minutes. The Rooster had 25 points with 7 rebounds, one of his better games, while Gaz Harris has now struggled in the last two. 2 of 9 for Gaz for 8 points in 28 minutes. I still think that Gary Harris should be owned in all leagues. Darrell Arthur, who'd been playing well, he was limited here, 15 minutes for 8 points, including 2 threes, and he is shooting at something like 54% from 3 for the season, which is just a ridiculous amount. I really like the way that he functions with Jokic. You could say that almost about anybody, though. But Arthur's that deeper league sort of guy that is probably a little bit under the radar. And by under the radar, I mean he's owned in 4% of leagues. So that probably needs to be a little bit higher. The next game we look at is the Lakers and the Jazz. The Jazz get the victory 96-88. Lou Williams with another big scoring performance. 20 points on 9 shots in 25 minutes. This is a pattern with Lou Williams. D'Angelo Russell's out. Lou Williams goes big. So before Russell comes back, try and see if you can get a top 50 asset for Lou Williams, because his minutes are going to come back, his shots are going to come back, and his form is going to come back. We've seen it already happen this year, and it will likely happen again. If it's a Zubats, he's good. He's the best center on this team. A second straight double-double for Zubats. 26 minutes, 16 and 10. Now, this was a game where Julius Randle did not play, so that meant that Tariq Black started at power forward, so it took him away from getting backup power forward minutes. Some of the other games where Zubats has played big minutes have been games where Larry Nance was out, so Tariq Black played at backup power forward. But the last game, everyone was healthy. But it was also a game that Randle played 20 minutes because he got benched. So it is hard to know, but available data, this is 3 double-doubles in the last 5 games for Zubats, makes us think that the Lakers are leaning towards using him more. Tim Mozgov played 17 minutes. And this Zubats was going up against Rudy Gobert here, and he got 16 and 10. If you've got room in a 12-team league, I don't hate adding him. Now, the Lakers don't play again until next week, so that's an issue. You might waste your streaming spot for a guy that doesn't play till next week. But the upside for him is significant. We're talking a guy that could be a top 70 player if he got to 30 minutes. That is a total pipe dream, though, to get the 30 minutes. I don't think he's going to do that. I think if he hovers anywhere, it's going to be 26 to 27, that sort of zone. But if he got 30 minutes, we're talking about a guy that could be a top 75 player. No problem with adding him at all, assuming you're not dropping someone that's of great consistent value, because the Lakers are leaning towards that. They realize Mozgov's not the answer. Tariq Black's not the answer. Thomas Robinson's so far from the answer that Zubats has now played well in these last handful of games. He is demanding minutes. He is getting minutes. And whether he sticks with it remains to be seen. The first time he got the double-double, he played 6 minutes the next game. But now this is 2 straight. So that's a change in philosophy from Luke Walton as well. And that's the positive sign we've got to take out of this. Uncle P hit 3 triples for 13 points in his 29 minutes, while Jordy Clarkson played 36 and went 16, 5 and 4. Now that is obviously boosted because D'Angelo Russell is out. Tariq Black in his start struggled 4 points in 30 minutes, while Larry Nance had 7 boards in his 23 minutes. If I had the choice, I'm taking Zubats over Nance at this point, and I do really like Nance as a player. But I'm definitely taking Zubats there. I'm taking Zubats over Nick Young. Of course, I'm taking him over Mozgov. I'm taking him over Brandon Ingram, who was scoreless in 20 minutes, and he is toast at the moment. He's finished. He can't do anything. He has lost all confidence. The coaching staff has actually lost some confidence in him as well. He was 0 of 6 from the field, only played 20 minutes, and this is 3 absolute disgusting games in a row from Ingram. I find it hard to think that he's going to be a top 100 player at any stage this season. He's owned in 54% of leagues, which is just way too high. It's too high. He is a long way off contributing. He shows flashes, but it doesn't happen enough. And the guy just, talk about Devin Booker, like the guy's just not a good shooter yet. He might become a good shooter. He hasn't proven it at all. Like he's the opposite of a good shooter at this point. He's got a long way to go. I'm not saying he's not going to be good ever, but he's got a long way to go, and I don't think he's going to be a useful player really at any stage this season. For the Jazz, Gobert had 6 blocks after being left off the All-Star team, 9 and 13 in 38 minutes, while Gordie Hayward celebrating his first All-Star appearance, 24 points in 32 minutes. Rod Hood returned, only played the 22 here, so Joe Ingles got more minutes than he'd been playing in Hood's absence. 26 minutes for Joe, 7, 4, and 2 with 3 steals. Really good stuff from Joe. And Quinn Snyder made another odd change to his rotation on a team that has 3 point guards already. Actually, 4 point guards already. George Hill, Howell Neto, Dante Exum, and Shelvin Mack. His backup point guard in this one was Alec Burks. So we had 3 backup point guards as DMP CDs. Exum, Mack, and Neto didn't play at all. And that moved Burks from a guy that was getting 22 minutes a night to playing only 14 minutes behind George Hill, where he scored 11 points. And they went with Ingles as the backup behind Hood, and Joe Johnson plays the 3 and the 4. Ingles was great, but it's going to be hard for him to carve out a big enough role to be even a 14-team league guy. But there's so much depth on this team that it is a concern. I think Hood comes up. He's a 12-teamer to me, Rod, rather than a 10-team league guy, and he has struggled for big stretches of this season. And I wouldn't be in a rush to grab him in a 12-team league. I think he's a 12-team guy, but it's borderline 12-team, not borderline. It's back-end 12-team value is probably the best way of me phrasing that. All right, what we're going to do now is look over the last 2 weeks from a head-to-head rankings point of view and talk about the top 20 players, talk about the undervalued and overvalued players, and have a look at some guys who could be available on your waiver wire who have performed well recently. Let's look at the top 20 players now over the last 2 weeks. This is head-to-head rankings. At number 20, this is Kyrie Irving. Marc Gasol comes in at 19 and Rudy Gobert comes in at 18. Eric Bledsoe is 17th, Jim Butler is 16th, Joel Embiid is 15th, LeBron is 14th, Rudy Gay is 13th. We know where Gay is now, he's injured, but in those 2 games that he played in the last 2 weeks, he was fantastic. Boogie is at 12 and John Wall is 11. Let's go to the top 10. Steph is at 10th, Giannis Antetokounmpo is at 9, DeAndre Jordan comes in at 8, which some of you might look at his ranking and go, that's bullshit. He's 30th in overall 8-cat rankings, but when I do my head-to-head rankings, I exclude the players' worst 2 categories, because you own DeAndre Jordan, you know that you're missing out on free throws, you know you're losing that category, so why bother including it in his overall rank? He's the 8th ranked player for what he actually does, averaging 17 and 16 with 2 blocks on 80% shooting. You drafted DeAndre Jordan for field goal percentage, for blocks, and for rebounds. He's giving you 16 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 80%. That's awesome. Number 7 is Nikola Jokic. Number 6 is Isaiah Thomas. 5 is Durant. 4 is Towns. 3 is Harden. 2 is Russ. And number 1 over the last 2 weeks is Kawhi Leonard, averaging 35.6 points, 2.5 threes, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals on 60% shooting. Yes, he is shooting 60% on 20 attempts. That's a ludicrous number. And 92% from the line on 10 attempts a game. So he is your number 1 player over the last 2 weeks. Let's now look at some guys who might be overvalued or undervalued based on their performance or their ranks over the last 2 weeks. Let's look at the overvalued guys. Now, Devin Booker is currently ranked at 22nd, and I did these numbers before today's games. So he is really flying up at the moment. I don't believe that he's a guy that's a top 25 guy. I think that he can be a top 50 player, but if someone buys into it, and they do, because he is a player that the internet and the fantasy basketball community in general, some people will get really excited about him. Some people are very skeptical of him as an empty gunner type of player, but some people do get really excited about a 19-year-old scoring 20 points in a row. Or, scoring 20 points in a game, 10 games in a row. They get excited, fair enough. So you might be able to switch him for someone who might, say, feel more consistent in that top 25 zone. Tyson Chandler's at 25. Yeah, he's not sticking there. Thad Young's at 28. It's coming on the back of ludicrous steal numbers. So you're not going to get top 30 value back for Thad, but he's in that zone where you expect something to cool off with those numbers. Markieff Morris at 32. Love what Markieff's doing. Obviously, he's a must-own guy, but he's not a top 35 player. There's no way in hell that he's that guy, so his numbers will dip a bit. Marcus Smart at 42. Great stuff from Marcus. Really putting in some good numbers, but I don't really think that 42nd is the spot for him. You're not going to be able to trade that. Lou Williams at 45, you might. Now, that's one that you should be targeting. Dion Waiters at 59. Yeah, that's not sticking either. And Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 82. I also believe that he will dip. He's playing much better and he's fine to own, but he's more a 14-team league guy, I believe, because once the Hornets get everyone healthy, Jeremy Lamb back, Cody Zeller is out now. If he gets back, we're going to see Kidd-Gilchrist go from 34 to 27 or 28 minutes, maybe 30, and he's not going to be able to maintain top 100 value. On the undervalued side of things, there's a few names here you can look at. D'Angelo Russell at 315. Yes, he's injured, but if he's on a waiver wire, I'm grabbing him. Zach LaVine at 228, maybe a little bit harder after today's game, but he was a guy that I did mention at the start of the week that you should be going after aggressively to try and acquire. Ryan Anderson at 211. This is what Anderson can do. I reckon he's appeared on this overvalued list this season in like the top 50, and now he's outside the top 200 because he is streaky. Now, I'm not a big Ryan Anderson fan, but if you can get him for back of your roster scrubs, do it. Greggy Munro at 209, he is trending up. Aaron Gordon at 205. It's coming in good minutes for Gordon, but he's just not producing in the level we want. If he's on a waiver wire, I grab him. Not sure that you're going to get great value if you try and trade for him, though. Julius Randle at 178. Not a Julius Randle fan, but he's better than that. And the pencil Harrison Barnes is at 166. Porzingis is at 156 in a real slump. Go hard after him in a buy low. Go real hard. George Hill at 139, also the same story. And Reggie Jackson and Hassan Whiteside. And Whiteside I spoke about on yesterday's show as being a very good buy low target. At number 99, Otto Porter is in a bit of a slump at the moment. Some of that is low usage, just not quite where he was that top 30 player for a big stretch. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to stick as a top 30 player, but I think he'll be better than that. And Anthony Davis at 35. I gave my reasons to try and acquire him for as little as possible on yesterday's show. Let's look now at some players who are under 50% owned in the top 100 over the last 2 weeks. At number 31, it's Iman Shumpert, who is shooting the ball crazily well. He is fine to own, but don't expect that rank to hold just because it's coming on the back of like 57% shooting, which there's no way for him to be able to continue. Seth Curry's at 50, so some good numbers for Seth. I talked about him a little bit earlier. I just don't see him being able to maintain this current level of production, which, to be honest, isn't all that high, and that rank is fueled by a high steals number. At 52 is Johnny Lua. Probably should be owned, but that's a high number. Darrell Arthur, well, that will have plummeted after today. He's at 66. Andy Bogut's at 69. He only fits certain teams.
Giggity!
So don't just be going to grab him off waiver wires. If you need what he brings, high field goal percentage, blocks and boards, fine. Bebe's at 72. Yeah, no problem with owning Bebe. He puts up good block numbers, great field goal percentage, decent free throw shooter. He can score, and at the moment, he's better than Patrick Patterson and Jared Sullinger for those minutes at the 4. Now, what Dwayne Casey does is a little bit confusing at times in terms of consistency of minutes for Bebe, but he's been playing very, very well. TJ McConnell's at 76. He should be owned in all leagues. Nene's at 80. He shouldn't be. Andre Iguodala is at 91. That's a fluke ranking. I wouldn't read too much into that. PJ Tucker at 94 and Joe Ingles at 98 are two players that I just talked about who are having nice value and can definitely be streamed in, but they're more 14-team league sort of players at this point. All right, I'm going to take a quick break now, and then we're going to be back in a minute or so. We're going to be back to preview all 10 games that are coming up on Friday. Hello, everybody. We're back. Let's look at the perfect DFS lineups from Thursday on FanDuel. Jeff Teague at 47.1 and Jameer Nelson at 35.3. Shooting guard Zachary Levine at 36.1 and Vic Oladipo at 29.1. At small forward, the pencil Harrison Barnes 38.4 and TJ Warren 32.6. Gorgie Jeng at power forward 27.3 and Nik Jokic at 60.8. And at centre, Karl Towns at 53 points gave you a total of 359.7, and that cost all 60,000 of the budget. On DraftKings, Jeff Teague at 53.5, Zach Levine at 38.75, Dorian Finney-Smith 30.25, Karl Anthony Towns 58, Nikola Jokic 64.5, Jameer Nelson 37, the Rooster at 37.75, and TJ Warren at 33.5 for a grand total of 353.25, and cost $49,700. There are 10 games coming up on Friday, so it's a huge slate. Let's get stuck into those now. The first one we're looking at is the Sacramento Kings on the road taking on the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are favoured by 4 and the total is 212 points. Kevin Serafin missed today's game for the Pacers. If he is out, Lavoy Allen takes his place, but that really has no impact on us DFS-wise. Let's talk point guards. We'll start with the Pacers point guard because we know what we can expect out of Jeff Teague. He's at 7,200 on FanDuel. He dropped 47 today and the salary's come down by $300, so I've got no issue with rolling him out there. On DraftKings, he's at 7,200 as well. He's on a fair roll at the moment. The matchup here is a good positive one for him also, so I think Jeff Teague is one of the better options that's available at point guard. Also, yesterday I gave a shout out to the people who watch this show or listen to this show and take notes. So many of you sent me messages and tweets and posts showing me the notes that you take. Seriously, you guys take more notes than I do for the podcast, and I host it. You got the notes that you take are crazy. I feel very humbled that people pay that much attention to what I say, and you guys write all these notes and listen and use it, and hopefully you guys win some money. But really fantastic stuff to see everyone sending me those pictures of the notes they take, and it made me feel bad for having such empty notes for myself when I'm recording the show. Let's talk about the Kings point guards. I don't know. Last game, Darren Collison played 36 minutes and Ty Lawson played 17. The game before, it was like a 26-22 minute split. You never know what you're going to get. Collison is the safer option. This matchup is a huge positive, but he also costs $400 more at $4,800 on FanDuel and $44 on DraftKings. $48 for Collison, $44 for Lawson. Over on DraftKings, Collison's at $48 and Lawson's at $4,000. So Lawson gets the boost there, but actually playing one of these guys, it's a risky proposition because you don't know if it'll be 32 to Collison and 16 to Lawson, or if it will be 24 apiece. One thing I feel pretty confident about is that Lawson's not getting 30 minutes, so that does limit his upside. I would only consider them as GPP guys. That's really all you can do with those guys at this point. Garrett Temple is at 4,400. He's just found a consistent role. I don't love it for GPPs, but I think in cash he is absolutely fine. He's averaging 23 over the last 3 games, and he's at 4,200 on DraftKings, averaging 24 over the last 5. It's exactly what you want him to be. The minutes will be there. The production should be fairly fine as well. So don't expect much, but get what you get. Monte Ellis is at minimum salary. That's cool. We won't be looking at worrying about using him. At small forward, CJ Miles is a minimum salary player on FanDuel, and he's at 3,700 on DraftKings. He had 20 points today, which obviously is fine, at 3,500. I don't really love him as a cash play, but I don't hate it. But as a GPP, he can get hot and really obliterate that sort of a price tag. So totally fine to use CJ Miles on both sites. No concern there. And Paul George remains at a fairly depressed price, 7,300 on FanDuel. On DraftKings at 7,900, he's not as appealing a target, but at 7,300 on FanDuel, love that. I'd be going right after Paul George. He's averaging 38 points over the last 3 and 36 over the last 5. So that price doesn't really feel justified. In fact, it's come down another $400. So no concern with Paul George, really. I think that's a great play in this sort of a matchup. At power forward, Thad Young's at 5,600. He's obviously at the moment relying upon steals, and it's not really getting you right to where you need in terms of his value, but he's okay in a very positive matchup against the Kings. We know that power forwards against the Kings can put up good numbers, and Young's been that guy in the past. So I've got no problem with using him. I think he's a decent play without being spectacular. For the Kings, Willie Cauley-Stein is a $3,700 player. He had 24 points in the last game in some extra minutes. So you have to consider him. On DraftKings, I consider him even more because he's at $3,000 there. And if he's worked himself into a more consistent role, which it appears he has, then that's value because he's averaging 20 over the last three. And at $3,000, you get 20 points, and it's celebration time. Well, it's not celebration time, but it's a pretty good start to help build a roster, especially if you're trying to squeeze guys like Yanni or Jimmy Harden into the lineup that way. That $3,000 from Will Cauley-Stein can be very useful in that scenario. Miles Turner is at $6,400. Love what he's been doing. Now he takes on Boogie Cousins. That's probably not going to work in his favor. So he's a fade at $6,600 on DraftKings. The same story. As for Boogie, $10,700. Yeah, I think we're looking at possibly 60 here for Boog. He had 61 in his last game. He's averaging 55 the last three times he's taken on the Pacers. No problem with DeMarcus Cousins at $10,700. He's at 11 on DraftKings. Still no issue with that at all. Really think he's going to be coming out and putting up some pretty impressive numbers. Well, I hope he does because he's fun to watch and he's fun to have in fantasy teams. Let's look at the next game, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Toronto Raptors. No spread currently out for this one because we don't know the status of DeMar DeRozan. He's currently listed as questionable, and obviously if he misses, it changes a lot for this team. And the most important thing it changes is that we load up on Norm Powell. That's the straightforward one. No DeMar DeRozan, all about Norm Powell. Powell's at $4,200, so it is a $700 price rise, but that doesn't bother me. I would still use him if DeRozan's out. If DeRozan's in, of course, there's no way that you can use Norm. In that situation, it just becomes impossible because he criminally, well, not criminally, but you know what I mean, in a basketball sense, criminally doesn't play enough. Let's talk point guards. Kyle Lowry, $8,600 on FanDuel. The matchup is a significant negative. I do not like Kyle Lowry at $8,600. He's the same price on DraftKings. He hasn't done well previously against Milwaukee. We know he's subject to not flexibility, that's the wrong word, to variability with his shooting. It's a GPP play, always, but no way that I feel good about using him in cash. Brogo's at $5,200. That eliminates him from really any sort of consideration to me at that price, and at $4,900 on DraftKings, it's pretty close to that same scenario. I do like Dellavedova though. He's at $3,900, so it's not a break the bank price. He'd played 30 minutes in 2 of the last 3 games and had done well in most of them. Now at $4,400 in DraftKings, I'm a little bit off it, a little bit sour, but at $3,900 on FanDuel, no problem. I think that's a great play. I would even consider it in cash. I leaned a little bit more towards tournament, but at that price, a starting center, and you hope gets 30 minutes, no issues with using Delly in that spot there. Corey Joseph gets a bump if DeRozan is out. He'll play some extra minutes, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's getting enough production to give us $4,000 worth of value, which is where he's currently priced. As for DeMar at $8,900, yeah, it's all right. I love it on DraftKings at $7,700. So if they say DeRozan's playing at $7,700 on DraftKings, I'd be all aboard that. On FanDuel at the $89, yeah, that's not happening. I don't feel great about that price tag over there. Tone Snell, yeah. Small forwards, Terry Ross is at $3,600. Always a GPP option. It's a good matchup, but if DeRozan's out, then he becomes a really solid GPP and even a cash play at $3,600, despite scoring under 9 points in his last game that DeRozan was out. Still has some value, whereas Damari Carroll at $4,200, that's a real tough one. He's at 43 on DraftKings. He's up and down. I would only want to look at him as GPP, but even then, I don't really find his upside to be all that high. At power forward, yeah, Patrick Patterson, Jared Sullinger, I don't think you really can care about either of those guys. Jabari Parker's the power forward you want to care about. He's at $7,800. He's had a fantastic season this year. He's at 39-point average over the last 3 games, but the Raptors do have an ability to limit what opposition power forwards can do. They've done it over the last 2 seasons. I don't think that $7,800 for Jabari is a good price. DraftKings, he's at $7,000, so love it. No problem. He's averaging 41 over the last 3. $7,000, all aboard Jabari over on DraftKings. So it shows the difference that sites can make. At center, Greggy Munro dropped 40 in the last game. He is up to $5,700, which is a pain. He's at 53 on DraftKings, but his upside if Jason Kidd does the right thing, and that's the thing. You've got to trust Jason Kidd to do the right thing, to make the right decision. That happens 50% of the time. Given the current pattern, and one thing I will say about Kidd is that he makes weird decisions, and he shows no long-term goal or consistency, but he shows short-term consistency. So until he doesn't, you don't know when that drop-off's coming, but we've seen some success from Munro in 29 minutes a night for the last 2 games. He'll run it. You feel good, he'll run it for 4 games at least. And then a weird change can come. He won't stick with stuff for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. He'll stick with it for a week, and then if his head, something, whatever happens in his head happens, the hamster falls off the wheel or whatever goes down, then he'll make that change. But he's not a guy, he's not Jeff Hornacek that's changing the backup center every single game. He's not Quinn Snyder who's changing the backup point guard every single game. He does it for 3 games. He does it for 4 games, kid. So that's why I feel okay about Greggy Munro here. Jonas Valanciunas at 5,700. I think it could be a good spot for Jonas. The concern is that you got Patterson, Sullinger, Bebe around, so that might limit what he can do minutes-wise, but that sort of a salary means that he doesn't even need to get to 30 points to be a useful player. At 5,800 on DraftKings, I'm not as high on it, but we've seen big men go off against the Bucks, so JV is clearly the most talented out of these big men in Toronto, and there's a real opportunity for him to get to 40. I just don't feel quite as confident with it because the other guys are all around, and they're all ready to play. As for Bebe, he's at 3,900. He's a GPP only sort of a play. And Miles Plumlee with 10 games on the slate at minimum salary. He occasionally has a decent game. He's at 3,000 on DraftKings. I'd consider it, but I think there might be some other better options that are out there for you. Let's move on to the next game. Where are we with this next one? It is the It's the Brooklyn Nets and the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs are favored by 15. The total is a whopping 226, but that could mean that it's 126 to 100. That there is huge blowout potential here. Huge. Yes, the Cavs have lost to the Pelicans and the Kings in back-to-back games. LeBron has given his thoughts to the media and on social media. There's no way that this gets kept close, is there? There's no way. There's no way that happens. But does LeBron go out there and play a shit ton of minutes? That's what your decision has to be. Do you think he does? I don't think he does. And by a shit ton, I mean I don't think he plays 42. I think he plays mid-30s. Maybe he gets a couple of minutes off in this one. And that's going to make it concerning. At point guard, Spencer Dinwiddie is playing big minutes. It's not giving us huge production. He had 21 in the last game. He's at 3,900. He could easily, in a positive matchup against the Cavs, get to 21 points again, and that would be totally fine at that salary. But being able to trust it and then having limited upside on top of it, I don't love it. Now on DraftKings at 3,400, that's one I can totally get behind. He's averaging 18 points over the last 3. That lower salary, getting 20 points there feels a little bit easier for Spencer. I still don't feel great about it though. Kyrie Irving at 8,400. Great matchup. Fantastic matchup. How long does he stay on the court, though? That's the concern. You need him to get 40 plus. I would prefer Kyrie to Kyle Lowry on this slate at similar salaries. And if the game is close, Kyrie's going to have to be playing minutes and putting up big numbers. So I'm okay with Kyrie. Again, it's a very, very good matchup. Point guards against the Nets, it's always a great opportunity. And Kyrie gets that opportunity here. At shooting guard, Iman Shumpert is at 4,100 on FanDuel. He's at 42 on DraftKings. I think there's value in using him. He's playing a good role, a decent role. He's scoring at a high rate. He's efficient. And at that price, I think he can achieve that value. Sean Kilpatrick, Randy Foye, the shooting guards on the Nets, that's just no interest to me at all. At small forward, of course, it's LeBron James at 10,800 over on FanDuel, and on DraftKings he's at 10,200. You love it, love the matchup, but the minutes do worry me, so I'd consider him more a GPP guy than a guy that I absolutely want to lock in cash, but he's got some GPP upside there. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is at small forward at 4,300. I have no faith in him at this point, and Bojan Bogdanovic, just a GPP play, but he's a good GPP play. He's a good GPP play at 4,300, and he can easily exceed 30 points, which is exactly what you want, and that's why he should be in. If you're submitting multiple GPP lineups, Bogdanovic should be in at least one of them every time the Nets play, because he's got that huge ceiling, and 35 is not his ceiling. Like, he's a 40, 45 point ceiling guy. He's also a 10 point floor. But he's not one of these guys. You say, oh, maybe he can have a good game, and then he goes out there and gives you 5.8x or 6x. He can go out there and give you 10. And that's exactly what makes a really good winning GPP lineup. At small, that's all the small forwards, isn't it? Yep. Oh, now Karis LeVert's the other one. He played 26 minutes in the last one. He's at 4,300. I just find it tough to spend 4,300 on LeVert, given that we don't know what his actual role is going to be and whether he's going to exceed that value. At 4,000 on DraftKings for LeVert, I feel a bit better about it, and I think he's getting minutes in the low to mid 20s. But whether that's going to result in him exceeding that value is where I'm a little bit doubtful. At power forward, Kevin Love at 7,900. Good matchup, just the same concerns as LeBron and Irving as to how much he actually plays. He dropped 46 in the game against the Kings, Lovey. He's averaging 40 across the last three. I feel okay with using him, no problems. Trevor Booker is not someone who is playing enough, and the Cavs are a terrible matchup. At center, Tristan Thompson at 4,700. He's just not doing anything at the moment to really get my confidence up. The Nets are a good matchup, but is Thompson the guy to take advantage of it? In general, you say no. So I don't think that I'd be looking at using him at this point. The other center, of course, is Brook Lopez, who is at 6,500 on DraftKings, which is a great price. Now the Cavs are a negative for opposition centers, and that's something you do have to bear in mind. But I think at 6,500, Brook is definitely worth a look. 7,400 over on FanDuel, probably not as interesting. I would go in a different direction to Brook over on FanDuel. All right, let's go on to the next game now. It's the Charlotte Hornets. They're taking on the New York Knicks. The Hornets are favoured by 1, and the total is 212.5 points. We've got a few injury concerns for Charlotte. Cody Zeller and Jeremy Lamb, who both didn't play in the last game, they're both listed as questionable. If Zeller is out, it's all about Spencer Hawes. Load up on Spence. If Lamb is out, it just boosts the ability of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist to get his value back, and it makes Ballinelli more of a GPP guy. But the one you really want to focus on is Zeller out, Hawes in. That's the move that pretty much pays off every single time that Zeller happens to miss time. So always have that in your head. I will constantly remind you, but always have that in your head. At point guard, Derrick Rose at 6,500 has not been in that real level of form, but this is a great matchup. Point guards against Charlotte do really thrive. Can Rose get it together? Well, at least he's playing for the less dysfunctional of the two teams that he has played for in his NBA career now. So at 6,500, can he do it? Yeah, I like Derrick Rose here. I don't think it's a terrible play at all. I think there's definite value. On DraftKings, I am all over it. He's at 5,700. That is a ludicrously low price over there. He is averaging 35 points over his last 5 games, Rose. He gets a positive matchup, a stupid low salary. Really like him here. I think it's a great spot to use Derrick Rose. It could easily bite me on the ass, but I love it. Brandon Jennings at 3,800 has been limited, to say the least. And Kemba Walker now, he gets a good matchup as well against Derrick Rose. 7,900 for Kemba, fresh off his first All-Star berth. Dropped 43 in the last game. He's averaging 37 over the last 5. It's a chunky salary, 7,900. It's a lot. And I would, for bang for your buck, I would take Rose over him in this matchup. But Kemba's worth looking at. He's at 7,900 on DraftKings as well. Definitely not a high priority. Definitely not a must-roster guy. But decent enough without being great. At shooting guard, Justin Holiday, minimum salary. Will he get 30 minutes? Will he get 10 minutes? It's Jeff Hornacek, so that changes on a game-by-game basis, makes him a risky play, but he'll be an extraordinarily low-owned GPP guy, and that can win you stuff. Nick Batum at 7,100 hasn't quite been giving us that level of production, so I'm not keen there, and at 73 on DraftKings, I'm less than not keen. And Kidd-Gilchrist, who is now averaging 29 points in the last 3 games on FanDuel. At 5,400, I think that's a very good option to use. It's better if Jeremy Lamb is out, but it's a very good option given the way that he's been able to just put up numbers fairly consistently of late, put up those good numbers. So yeah, Kidd-Gilchrist is someone that I would consider. Carmelo Anthony's at $8,000. He loves playing the Hornets. I think that getting 40 points out of him here is going to be absolutely fine. He's at 7,200 on DraftKings. Ridiculous. These prices on DraftKings for this game are low. Yeah, Rose Mallow, you get Zeller out and you put Spencer Hawes in there. Bill Hernan-Gomez, there's a couple of guys that you could look at this game and stack it and get some value out of some of these players. Mallow on DraftKings is in a really good spot. On power forward, Kristaps. We know he's been struggling. There's no way to doubt that. He's averaging under 20 points for the last 3 games. At 6,600 in a positive matchup for Kristaps, 62 on DraftKings. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you go at it? Because we know that he can come out there, drop a 40, and everyone goes, yeah, it's Kristaps. We know how good he is. And that's just the vibe that I get from him. Hopefully, this slump is nothing to do with his foot. It doesn't appear to be, or his Achilles. But it has been a slump. I feel pretty good about him being a GPP option and being able to not only exceed that number, but smash through it in most scenarios that I run in my head. Frank Kaminsky at 3,900, nah. Marv Williams has been putting up some very good numbers. He's at 5,100 Marv, and he's at 48 on DraftKings. Over the last 5 games, he's averaged 28 points, and that's great at 4,800. Do I feel confident in using him? No, especially not. I don't think he's got much GPP upside, but I wouldn't 100% hate him in cash. Just with so many other games on, there are other directions that you can go that probably make more sense. As for Zeller at 5,200, well, if he played, I'd love it, but I don't know that he's going to play at this point. Bill Hernan-Gomez has played 3 strong games in a row. He's at 4,700 now over on FanDuel, and he's at 39 on DraftKings, which makes him one of the best options on the entire board. In the last 5 games that Bill Hernan-Gomez has played, he's averaged 29 points. At 3,900, he looks like an awesome option. Now, there is the risk. There is the risk of Hornacek saying, sorry, Bill, you're playing too well. Can you just go back and be a DMP CD? I don't think that risk is going to stand, though. I think that he's now sold on Hernan-Gomez, and we're going to see him play the most minutes out of all the centers for probably the remainder of the season, to be honest. So I am fine with Bill at 3,900. At 4,700, I'm less interested, but I'm still interested. Roy Hibbert will start, so will Joakim Noah, and they'll be irrelevant. So I wouldn't bother with either of those guys. Roy Hibbert will start, obviously, if Cody Zeller happens to be not ready to go with that quad issue that he's dealing with. Orlando and Boston. The spread for this game is not currently out. We've got a couple of injuries we need to pay attention to. Al Horford and Jonas Jerebko are both listed as probable. For the Magic, I don't think that Evan Fournier plays. He did not practice on Thursday. DJ Augustin did take part in practice. He is questionable. Now, with Fournier and Meeks out, there's obviously minutes there at the 2. Jeff Green played 34 minutes at shooting guard in the last game, so maybe that's what we expect. Do we go back to CJ Watson? If DJ Augustin plays, I think that Watson goes back to starting shooting guard, because Frank Vogel doesn't have the rotational capacity to be able to work out how to make your backup point guard also be your starting shooting guard. He doesn't seem to have that brain power to be able to do that. But if DJ's there and he's playing at backup point guard, then CJ Watson potentially goes back and starts. That's a situation to monitor. And if CJ Watson starts, I would be okay with using him. If Jeff Green starts, then there's value in Jeff Green, and that is a real weird sentence to say. Let's talk about the other point guards now. Lord Alfred Payton is at 6,500. Really stunk it up in the last game, but had been crushing it before that. 6,500 is a decent whack. It's a fair amount of salary to spend on someone. But he gets the elite defense of Isaiah Thomas. So there could be a big opportunity. A big opportunity for him to put up some pretty good numbers here. So I'm okay with using Lord Alfred. I don't feel totally confident with it, but I'm okay with using him. Isaiah Thomas at 9,800. That's a $500 price rise for you keeping score at home, people. He's at 9,600 on DraftKings. Fading him has been tough. Definitely. He's averaging 52 over the last 5. But as I highlighted on yesterday's show, there is zero chance that anyone can keep up this shooting. It's impossible. At some point, it will drop. It is literally impossible that he keeps up this form. That being said, why wouldn't you use him in a GPP? Because he's smashing value basically every day. It just will drop off at some point, and it will put a massive hole in your lineups. At that salary, at basically $10,000, it torpedoes your cash games if he goes for 34. And that's a real possibility. So, totally fine with him in GPPs. No worries. Cash? I'm probably scared off. Marcus Smart, don't know if he'll start or not, but he's still going to play 30 plus minutes. He's at 5,600. I don't like that salary for Marcus. And he's at 57 on DraftKings, so that's a no-go there. And DJ Augustin, I wouldn't be worried too much about him. At shooting guard, CJ Watson I talked about before. If he starts at $4,000, he's a GPP type of upside play, and at 3,800 on DraftKings, the same story. If he's off the bench, well, he played limited minutes, just the 23 in the last game, and that obviously renders him useless. Shooting guards, there's nothing to love here. Mario Hezonja, no. Let's talk small forwards, though. Aaron Gordon is playing consistent minutes. It's not consistent production, but it's consistent minutes. He's at 5,200 on FanDuel and 54 on DraftKings. I'll just scrap that on DraftKings. I'm not interested. But against the Celtics, I think he's in a decent spot to exceed that value, and I feel decently okay with considering him. That's as tepid a recommendation as you could get, I reckon. But I don't think that he's a horrible option here. I don't think that he's going to shit the bed against this Celtics defense, which has been shitting the bed for the majority of the season. I think that Gordon could be a nice play, but I'd lean a little bit GPP with him. Jeffy Green at 3,900. Jeff's averaging 25 points over the last 3 games. At 3,900, you can't argue with that. That's really fantastic production. He's at 4,000 on DraftKings. You hear DJ Augustin's out, or you hear that Jeff Green's starting, no problem using Jeff Green. I think that would be a smart way to go about it. Jay Crowder's crushing it as well at the moment. He's at 5,900. I don't necessarily believe he's going to be able to continue hitting threes at this same level, so I'm a little bit skeptical about him at almost $6,000 on both sites, and I might just go a different direction there to Jay. At power forward, Serge Ibaka, 6,000. Good matchup. I feel okay about Serge getting to 30. I'm not really sure his upside is all that high, but I feel pretty good about him at that price tag. And Jonas Jerebko, who started the last game for started the last game for the Celtics. He's a minimum salary player. Put up 18 points and got smacked in the face by Jimmy Harden. 18 points at 3,500 is nice. Would I feel good about using him in cash games? I don't think I would. I can't see that as being an awesome option. Now, on DraftKings, on the other hand, at $3,000, yeah, great. If he's starting $3,000, no problem. Because I think he'd almost have to punch a chair or something to not get value at that sort of a salary. So that makes him useful at that salary on DraftKings. At center, Nick Vucevic is at 6,600. Maybe just a little bit high. Maybe. I'm not sure his upside's enough to justify it in GPP as well. You know what I'm going to say at Al Horford. FanDuel just thinks their pricing's not high enough, so they dumped another 300 onto his head. He's now at 7,600. Yeah, you know what? He had a good game in the last one, put up 46, but to him to get 7,600, it just doesn't happen often enough. On DraftKings, he's gone up as well, but he's up to 7,000, so that's fine. No problem with using him at 7,000 on DraftKings, and I think he's one of the better center options that are actually out there on the board. Kelly Olynyk, yeah. If Horford happens to be out, which it doesn't look like, but if Horford's out, you would have to take a punt on Olynyk as a GPP type of guy. Bismack Biyombo's a non-starter, in my opinion. Let's move on now. Let's go to the next game. Where are we? The Houston Rockets and the Philadelphia 76ers. No spread currently here. Jahlil Okafor, Joel Embiid are both listed as questionable. No, they're not. Scratch that. They're both listed as doubtful, so we don't expect them to play. So it's time for Nerlens Noel again. On the Houston side, both Eric Gordon is listed as questionable with a back issue, and Nene is likely back after resting the last game. Nene doesn't have much impact, but he takes away the upside of Clint Capella and the table Montrezl Harrell. Obviously, the Philadelphia situation is the more important one for DFS points of view. But we're expecting that Joel and Jahlil are both out. Let's talk point guards now. Pat Bev is at 5,500, has been a little bit under in his performances recently. I'm not a huge fan of 5,500 for Pat Bev. 5,200 for him on DraftKings is a little bit safer, but still, I think there are better point guard options that are around. TJ McConnell at 5,600. I would prefer McConnell over Beverly at that $100 extra on FanDuel. TJ over on DraftKings at 5,300. Again, just the extra $100, but the scoring system really does favor Beverly over on DraftKings, so that makes TJ not a good option. It makes him an okay option, I'll rephrase that. But on FanDuel, I do like McConnell just a little bit more at that price that he's at, which is we're at 5,600. I think that he's fine in a cash game to use TJ McConnell. At shooting guard, Jimmy Harden is at 12,000 buckaroos. Can he get that value back at 60 points? It's not easy. He hasn't hit 60 in the last 5 games. If you've got the cash left, play him. If you don't squeeze him in. Don't start a lineup with Harden and say, let's build the lineup around 12,000 of James Harden. And get your 10,000 of Yanni in there. If you've got 12,000 left and a shooting guard spot open, of course, it's great. Put Jim in. Get your 50 points. Get your 53. But reaching that value is a tough proposition. Same on DraftKings at 12,600. It's a lot. And there are other options out there that I think will end up making more sense. I don't like Eric Gordon at 5,700, and I definitely don't like Gerald Henderson. At small forward, Trev Ariza is at 5,200, has not been giving us that sort of value. Not aboard Trevor Ariza at that mid 5,000 price tag. It's just not happening for me. Whereas Bob Cove has been crushing it. 5,600 for Bob Cove. Hey, maybe this is a revenge game that not many people know about. He's got a great matchup, Covington. Small forwards have been able to do well against the Rockets this season. And he's got a friendly price tag at 5,600. The 5,700 for him on DraftKings isn't as good, but Covington's averaging 31 over the last 3 games. So I would be okay with considering using him and feeling pretty good about it. Sam Decker had a big game in the last one. If Eric Gordon is out, Decker is at 4,100. I would feel okay, but his big game resulted in 24 points, so not really big upside at that $4,100 salary. So don't get overly suckered into thinking that he's going to be this brilliant option. Nerlens Noel should be. He's at 4,600. Had 35 in the last game. We assume he starts. We assume he plays close to 30 minutes. Now on DraftKings, they've bumped him to 5,800, which is a huge bump. But he can still retain that value, so I don't think that that's a horrible situation. Love it on FanDuel, less love on DraftKings, but still it's a worthwhile scenario. Richaun Holmes is down to 3,900, absolutely worth a GPP look. Over on DraftKings, he's at the same, 3,900. He's got the ability to go for 24, 25 points. I don't feel totally confident about it, but he is a GPP guy to take a squiz at. Ryan Anderson is always a GPP guy. We talk about players like Bojan Bogdanovic who are GPP only. Like that's exactly what Ryan Anderson is pretty much every time he's out there. While Dario Saric is at 4,300. Yeah, just a couple of $100 too expensive for Dario. Ersan Ilyasova had a big game in the last one, but his salary is right where it needs to be, and that's the last thing you want to hear as a fantasy player, that his salary is in the right spot. $6,000 on FanDuel, $5,900 on DraftKings for Ersan, and that sort of cuts off any ability for him to exceed it, I believe. At centre, Clint Capella's at 4,800. With Nene back, I don't feel confident about rolling Capella out there the same as I wouldn't with Nene, or with the table Montrezl Harrell. All right, the next game is the game that ESPN switched out so they could play Houston and Philadelphia, and it's the game where there's a lot of intrigue. It's the Miami Heat traveling to the Chicago Bulls. There is no current spread for this one, but does Rondo play? That's the question. I don't think... I don't know. There are so many things in play with this team. Now, before we get into the game, I'll give you my thoughts on this situation. I don't like Rajon Rondo. Said it plenty of times. Don't like him. I think he's a terrible NBA player at this point in his career. Used to be brilliant and was one of my favourite players. He's a disruptive force at times, and trouble always follows him. But in this case, I agree with a lot of the points that he made in that Instagram post. I don't agree with him attacking teammates for airing dirty laundry in the media and then airing dirty laundry in the media. I don't like the hypocritical nature of it. But what he said is true. And from everything that I hear, the young players love him. He works his ass off for them. He supports them. He teaches them. He puts in extra hours to help them, and they all love him. Portis, Valentine, Grant, Carter Williams. They love him. And they love what he does for them and helping them. And that's an admirable quality. Some of the other stuff that he does, he's a terrible on-court player. Has issues with coaching staffs. I don't think there's any way that Rondo finishes the season on this team. But Wade and Butler are not blameless. Wade is lazy. He's so lazy defensively. Jim Butler, poor leader. Not just because of this. Lots of opportunities for this. He's a bitcher, he's a whiner, he's a whinger, and he pisses me off. For as good as he is, he frustrates me. It's all front office, really. Your coach is spineless. Højbjerg makes questionable decisions with a questionable roster that's been given to him. The pairing of Wade, Rondo, and Butler was ridiculous. I understand that Wade became available later, but the pairing of Rondo and Wade, or Rondo and Butler to begin with, was ridiculous. And I was very anti it as soon as it happened, before Wade came on board. So, the front office needs to be accountable. The draft picks that they make, they don't always make sense. The deals that they make, or the lack of deals that they make, don't make sense. The coaching rotational decisions don't make sense. The coaching schemes and offensive sets don't make sense. The hiring of the coach doesn't make sense. The playing of the players doesn't make sense. This is, what happens over the next 24 hours for this Bulls team is going to be very interesting. Does Rondo play? If I had to lean anywhere, I would say no, because that speaks to the spinelessness of this organization. That they would come out and punish him, but they wouldn't punish Butler or Wade for saying the same things, for actually starting this and abusing their teammates, and Rondo comes out and abuses Wade and Butler by defending his teammates. I can see Rondo not playing. I can see Rondo getting cut within the next 48 hours, to be honest, and nothing happening to Wade and Butler, which is hypocritical bullshit. Again, hate the way that Rondo went about it. Stupid to go about it that way, but I agree with his sentiments. I agree with some of the things he said, and it marries up with a lot of the things that I've heard about Butler in the past, and it's a weird time to be a Bulls fan. Don't like Rondo, but actually feel somewhat sorry for him with some of the stuff that, and majority of it is on him, but he actually, I feel like he had well-placed intentions here and executed it horribly. But how do these guys now play together? How does Rondo, Wade, and Butler play? Let's go into the game itself. Let's talk point guards first. There's no injury worries to be concerned about at this point, except for Hassan Whiteside, who's dealing with an ankle problem, and that caused him to have limited minutes in the last one. If Whiteside is out, it's all about Will Reed, and Jimmy Johnson gets a big bump. Jimmy, make us proud. Yeah, so they'd be the guys that get the bump if Hassan Whiteside happens to be out. Let's talk point guards. Goran Dragic is at 7,200. He gets whatever this mess is that the Bulls are trotting out at the moment, so that is fine. Love that. 35 plus points. No concern with Rondo. Not Rondo. No concerns with Dragic at that price tag. Really, really like it. He's at 7,500 on DraftKings. No problem. I think he's a good play in a positive matchup in a situation where the Bulls team could absolutely, completely implode. That could totally happen. The Bulls point guards, well, they're not playing any minutes. MCW, DMPCD. And apparently the issue that Wade and Butler have is with Carter Williams, who, newsflash, did not play the last game against Atlanta when you embarrassingly lost a huge lead. Jaren Grant's playing 20 minutes as a starter. Rondo's single-digit guy, maybe teens. They're not going to be impactful players. At shooting guard, Wayne Ellington's at $4,000 over on FanDuel. Love the upside here with no Joshie Richardson, with no Tyler Johnson. Wayne Ellington at that price tag has upside, but put him as more of a GPP guy. I don't completely hate him as cash, to be honest, but I don't feel great about it. But I do like him as GPP because he can go for 30, he can get hot, and yeah, the Bulls defense, it's not good. So there's an opportunity for him. How do you think Dwayne Wade's going to go? He's at 7,900 on FanDuel because they've just gone, screw it, and let's just bump him up. They've knocked him up $900. Now, probably because he's averaging 50 over the last three and turning in huge performances. He wasn't great the last time he took on Miami. But with all this shit that's gone down, and by the way, the Dwayne Wade Instagram post is fake. Why would you make it up? Again, it comes back to these people. Why make up... This situation is ridiculous as it is. Why add something bullshit in there? The Rajon Rondo one's not fake. That's real. That's stupid. Why add something fake in there? Because you're a whore that likes. You need to get your likes, you need to get your retweets, because it self-validates your miserable life. Don't buy into that Wade one. It was fake. The Rondo one, real. $900 price rise is huge. But he could have a monster. He could have a real monster with all this shit going on and playing Miami. Now, on DraftKings, Dwayne Wade's at $7,000. That's perfect. Put him in. Yeah, I talk about revenge games sarcastically a lot of the time, but this is not just a revenge game. This is Miami. This is Pat Riley. And this is Dwayne Wade revenge against the rest of the Bulls team, perhaps. It could be epic from him. Could be epic from Jim Butler as well, who's priced at $9,800 and had 54 in that last game against Atlanta. On DraftKings, he's at $8,900. The same story. Him and Wade going to go out there and literally just pass it to themselves the whole game? Could. That's what happened in Atlanta. They didn't win. But, yeah, there are real chances to go absolutely massive in this one. I prefer them both on DraftKings to FanDuel, but it's going to be an interesting scenario. The rest of the small forwards offer me nothing. Paul Zipser is now the sixth man, but he doesn't touch the ball enough to be useful. Okaro White had a big game in the last one. He had 29 points. But if Whiteside is out, now White is only available on DraftKings, where he's at $3,500. If Whiteside is out, then he would be an interesting player to me. He's not available on FanDuel just at this point. At power forward, yuck. Taj Gibson has been horrible. It's a negative matchup. He's at $4,600. I don't feel good about it. Nick Mirotic at $3,700. I don't feel good about using him either. I would punt Gibson in a GPP. I think he's got some 30-point upside, but he just has been so piss poor recently that I can't find confidence in that. James Johnson at $5,600, as I touched on, has been struggling, but if Whiteside is out, then that's all aboard the Jimmy Johnson trade. And at centre, speaking of horrible, Robin Lopez has been horrible. He has got GPP upside here in a matchup against Hassan Whiteside, which is great for him. But he has been giving us absolutely nothing. But $4,400 is not a bad price to put on someone who can go for 30, and he's done well against Miami in the past. Did very well against them earlier in this season. Chris Felicio is one of the cheap centers you can go at. $3,600, who has been outplaying Lopez. He's averaging 19 points over the last 3 in only 19 minutes. He's putting up really good numbers. I like Felicio as a minimum salary guy. $3,000 on DraftKings, I like him even more. He can get to 20 points there, and that's fantastic at $3,000. So I do like that. As for Hassan Whiteside at $8,600, I don't think you can have any confidence in Whiteside's play at the moment from a DFS point of view, especially at that salary. Now on DraftKings, he's at $7,400, so that makes him a very sneaky GPP play if he is ready to go, because that's low salary, he's been shithouse, he's under-owned, and he could tear the Bulls apart because they're bad. They're really bad. But let's see how this all plays out. It's going to be fascinating to see what the Bulls do with the rotation and how the team addresses this tomorrow at Shoot-Around. You want to hear from Bulls beat reporters? Go and follow the guys from Locked On Bulls, Sean Hyken and Cody Westerland. They'll be at Shoot-Around and they'll report all of it back, with I'm sure an appropriate level of snark as well. So follow them, and Locked On Bulls is an absolute must listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. You will have to hear everything that Sean and Cody has got to say today and tomorrow. Absolutely going to be the first podcast that I listen to after I've done this one. The next game we'll look at, the Washington Wizards taking on the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are favored by 3.5, and the total here is 212. Mike Muscala is questionable with an ankle injury, but that doesn't really change too much from a DFS point of view. Let's look at the point guards here, because we've got two good ones. Johnny Wall and Den Schroeder. On FanDuel, Schroeder is at $6,700 and has been putting up 37 points a game in his last 3. The matchup's a hard one. It's John Wall, it's tough. But I believe in Schroeder, and I think that he can have some value here. I think he's useful. At $6,400 on DraftKings, the same story. I feel pretty good about him getting close to where he needs to be with value. As for Johnny Wall, it's a big price, $10,200, but is there a team that's better outside of the Nets to play as a point guard than the Hawks? The answer to that is generally no. So John, at that price, I feel really good about him. Now, you could take him or you could take Isaiah Thomas. I think Thomas is the better GPP play. I think Wall is the better cash play, and I feel pretty confident about Wall getting me 48 47, 48 pretty much every time that he would play Atlanta, whereas Thomas, I think we've got 55, 35 as a big range in scoring. So I do like John Wall here at that price tag. He's at 9,900 over on DraftKings as well. So that's a very sexy price. Shooting guard, Brad Beal, 7,100. Fine. Not much more to say about Brad Beal. 6,800 on DraftKings, fine as well. I think he's got value in both tournaments and in cash games also. Timmy Hardaway is a tournament-only player, 25 points in the last one. He's at 4,600. That is not appealing in cash whatsoever. At 4,100 on DraftKings, it's even better value for GPPs, but yeah, I'm still not interested in using him in cash. He is just way too up and down to consider. At small forward, Tarbo's at 3,700. Well, he's not playing the Bulls, so that probably limits what he can do in terms of offensive stuff. 37 on DraftKings. Yeah, he puts up numbers, but there's no upside in Tarbo whatsoever, and there's downside. So that sort of takes him out of being a cash play and a tournament play in my mind. Kelly Oubre is getting some minutes, but it's not translating into really big scores. He's at 3,700, so the price should appeal to you. The production won't. On DraftKings at 35, I feel a bit better with him, and I wouldn't hate using him. To be honest, I wouldn't hate using him even in a cash game to help balance a lineup, but I'm not totally in love with it. Otto Porter at 6,200 hasn't been hitting that number for a little bit of time. Don't hate the bounce back, but he is more of a GPP type of a guy here. And Kent Bazemore is all GPP, despite the fact that he is averaging 32 over the last three. If everything we've seen from Bazemore this season tells us not to trust him, he's at 4,800, and he gets a shit matchup because Otto Porter is most likely going to destroy him. Power forward, Paul Millsap, 8,100, four-time All-Star Paul Millsap, 8,100. Yes, he has regressed this season, but I still think at 8,100 in a matchup against the Wizards, it's a good one for him. At 74 on DraftKings, love that. That is absolutely smash-worthy. Look to get him in lineups. I think it's one of the better value plays. It's actually out there on the board. So do really like Paulie Millsap there. Markieff Morris has been crushing it, but his salary has also now crushed it up to 6,900.
Giggity!
But he's been doing that in terms of value, 37 over the last three. I just don't feel confident about Markieff at that sort of a price tag. At 6,800 over on FanDuel, you'd have to consider him GPP only. Yeah, he's been crushing it, but that's too high. Dwight Howard is at 7,100. I feel good about Dwight in this matchup. I feel good that he can maybe not exceed the number by a huge amount, but can be a fairly solid cash play. Whereas Marcin Gortat at 5,600, not against Dwight. I'm not sorry, Marcin. I don't think you're in a great spot there against Dwighty Howard. Let's move on to the second last game of the night. This podcast, once again, has been a long one, but we did have a lot to talk about, so I don't feel as guilty for keeping you. I'm not keeping you. Switch it off. Just download it. And that's another tip for you guys. If you ever can't listen to the podcast, just download it anyway. It still gives me my numbers, so I can take it to advertisers and say, look how good we're doing. And that's another. And also, don't forget to support the advertisers. If you're looking for something, if you're looking for a new watch, Lord Timepieces, and use that promo code. It does really help the show. And go onto SeatGeek and just register an account and put that code in. Doesn't hurt you, and it helps promote the show and helps keep this show going and hopefully improving in quality and content as the months and the years progress. The next game is, as I said, the San Antonio Spurs. They're taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. No spread yet. Anthony Davis is listed as probable, but I'm sure everyone here has total stage fright in terms of using him. Kawhi Leonard is questionable with his sore hand, and John Simmons is doubtful with his wrist. Tone Parker is likely to be back as well with that foot issue, so that takes Pat Mills and DeJounte Murray likely out of consideration. If Kawhi is out, Kyle Anderson is going to be the guy. Now, Anderson's going to get some extra run with John Simmons out, but he becomes a player that you look at in a lot of DFS scenarios if Kawhi Leonard happens to miss this game. He's at 3,900, Kyle Anderson on FanDuel, and should easily exceed that sort of value if Leonard happens to miss the game, which, again, it's a 50-50 proposition at this point. At point guard, Tone Parker, you know what, forget Tone Parker. Drew Holiday at 6,800, playing very well, but that's a decent salary. And the matchup against the Spurs does not fill me with confidence for Drew, so I really can't get behind it. DraftKings at 7,500 is a matchup I'm totally got zero interest in using him in. As I said, Pat Mills and DeJounte Murray become guys that you can't really use. Dan Green's at 3,600. Yeah, It's even hard to use him in a GP. Look, he had a big game in the last one, but it was 25 points, and that's probably his best game that he's had in the last 3 to 4 weeks. So not interested really in Danny Green. Manu at 3,700. Yeah, Manu's a sneaky GPP guy because in a situation with Simmons out and maybe Kawhi's out, he could easily drop 30. And I would feel okay about using Manu in a GPP, and his ownership's going to be ridiculously low. Tyreek is at 5,500. Good game in the last one, but hasn't quite been living up to 5,500. The matchup shit. That's a no from me for Tyreek Evans. Each-one more got hot in the last game as well, dropping 35 points. At 3,800, he is alright, but if I'm taking a punt on a low-price shooting guard, it's Langston Galloway. He's at 3,600. It's obviously a GPP only, but he can get hot, and when he gets hot, Alvin Gentry go out there and play 30 and just bomb away and have no restrictions, and that's exactly what Galloway does, and he can be useful. So that is my sneaky GPP. How did you decide to play this guy type of player? Langston Galloway is my guy for the day. Small forwards, Kawhi's at 9,800. If he plays, no problem. Love the matchup. It's a high salary, but he's crushing it. That's if he plays. But we don't know that at this point. And at 9,000 on DraftKings, exactly the same story. And Kyle Anderson takes that spot. Otherwise, the small forwards for the Pelicans are useless. At power forward, Anthony Davis, 10,300. I don't think there's any way that you can trust it in cash at this point. You're coming back from this injury. But 10,300 in a game where, and at 9,700 on DraftKings, in a game where to keep them competitive, he's going to have to go big. I think it's a great GPP play. No one will be interested because if you're playing large size tournaments, you know it. You've probably said it yourself. Never playing this guy again. Anthony Davis screws me every time. This guy, or throw whatever bullshit term out there you want. He's a pussy. He's made of glass. Of course he does this. Leads the league in X-rays. Whatever you want to throw out about him. That means he'll be low owned. And at 9,700, can Anthony Davis drop 60? Easily. Not even a question. Can he drop 60? And that's a great use of 9,700. In a cash game, you should be right to be skeptical of using him, because I am, and I wouldn't use him in a cash game at that price, coming back where we don't know how the thigh is. But in a GPP, if he goes off at half time, you just go, oh well, that doesn't matter. But if he hits, low percentage, high yield, it works. LaMarcus Aldridge is at 7,900. I like the matchup for him. I don't like spending 7,900. And Dave Lee, who started all but one of the games that Pau Gasol is out, is at 5,700. He played only 21 minutes in the last game. So I'm a little bit concerned there. And at 5,700 is a decent, well, it's not a decent, it's a bloody high price tag. And 59 on DraftKings. I have absolutely no interest in using David Lee at that price. If Anthony Davis is out, of course, we're going all Terrence Jones. He's at 5,700. But if Davis plays and Jones starts, which he could, then I don't care. I don't want to use Terrence Jones in that situation. We saw last game. He played like 26 minutes in a game that Davis left at halftime. And I don't see him getting 35 minutes to go through that value. He's at 6,900 on DraftKings.
Giggity!
That's way too high for a scenario that he could share the court with Davis. If Davis is out, then fine. Then you know what? Then he might have some upside. But even then, it's a risky proposition at spending $7,000 on Terrence Jones. You got bigger balls than me if you go on that route. At centre, Dwayne Dedmon at 3,700. If he starts, sure. If not, forget it. And who wants to have a slice of Omer Ashik? The answer should be a resounding nobody. Let's move on to the last game of the night. It is Memphis. They're traveling to take on the Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers are favored by 1 in what seems like an odd spread to me, and a total of 207.5 points. We need to check the status of Mo Harkless for Portland, who missed the last game with a calf issue. With Memphis, JaMychal Green and Chandler Parsons are both probable after missing the last game with knee issues. Now, this is the first game of a back-to-back. I imagine Parsons plays and then sits out Saturday. And Troy Daniels is listed as questionable for the Grizzlies. If Harkless misses, it's going to be more minutes for Crabbe, it's going to be more minutes for Evan Turner, but they're not really all that appealing. As the point guards go, Mike Conley's at 7,400, has been a little bit down in his production lately, but I feel okay about using Mike Conley in this matchup because it is against the Blazers. Both of these guys, Conley and Lillard, missed out on the All-Star team. I know one of them, Lillard, is going to be pissed. Conley, I don't think, will show it outwardly, but Lillard does take this stuff very personally, and as a result, lots of people are going to own him tomorrow. because they're going to be going, oh, it's pissed off Dame, it's pissed off Lillard. Let's go with the All-Star snub narrative. And that's fine, but if you use it in cash, it's going to ruin you. And I think his ownership's going to be pretty high in GPPs tomorrow, especially on DraftKings where he's at 7,800, which is getting really low. But I do think his percentage will be high. So if you're someone who's looking at projecting ownership, that's going to be a high percentage for him. And that might rule him out of actually being consideration. And in cash games, he's really hard to use anyway. So it is a tough scenario to consider using Dame Lillard. Shooting guards. Tone Allen had a big double-double in the last game, but with Green and Parsons likely back, I wouldn't expect that again from him, while CJ McCollum is still priced at over $8,000 on FanDuel. That's way too high. He's at $7,100 on DraftKings. That I can get behind, but the slower pace of the Grizzlies makes me a little bit concerned that he won't get, there won't be enough possessions in the game, or that he'll get to that level. But I think that he is decent at $7,100 over on DraftKings. Alan Crabb, I said, will get the extra bump if Mo is out. He doesn't really do it for me. He's a GPP guy, and that's probably about it. At small forward, Evan Turner at 4,500. I just don't see the appeal in using him, really. And Chandler Parsons. Well, Chandler Parsons, the last time he played, he dropped 26 points in 22 minutes. He's at 3,700. Talk about sneaky GPP guys. Could Chandler be that guy? Most signs point to no. But he was good. He played 22 minutes. Not the worst option. He's at 3,200 on DraftKings. That should make you even more excited. Well, not excited. That should make you more comfortable in going 3,200. Can I get 27 points out of Chandler Parsons? Sure, I'll take it at 3,200. Nothing. We're not counting stats for deep Vs, but he still gets some stats on the court. And at 3,200, that is ludicrously low. Jim Ennis goes back to a bench role. At power forward, JaMychal Green at 4,500. I'm not a huge JaMychal Green fan. On DraftKings, I don't mind him at 4,400, but he's one of those one game on, one game off sort of a player, and that makes him more a GPP type of a target. Al-Farouq Aminu, I can't trust his production off the bench, and Zach Randolph will likely go back to a lower role, and $6,000 is just way too high for Zach Randolph. I will not be spending that cash on him if JaMychal Green plays, which at this point we assume he does. At center, Mason Plumlee, 6,900. Great against the Lakers. Now he gets Gasol, and that's a real concern. So that is a no from me from Mason Plumlee against Gasol. As for Gasol, 8,700 on FanDuel. Shit, that's high. It's a great matchup for him there, but that is real high. Head across to DraftKings. He's up to 8,000 now, but I'm okay with 8,000 on DraftKings. That can be used. He's crushing it. He's averaging 52.5 over the last three. Just on FanDuel, 8,700 just doesn't sit right with me to spend that much on Marc Gasol for as good as he is and as much as I do like him. Let's have a look at the picks of the day on DraftKings. Matty Dellavedova at 30, not DraftKings, FanDuel, my mistake. Matty Dellavedova, 3,900. Goran Dragic, 7,200. And John Wall at 10,200. At shooting guard, Wayne Ellington, 4,000. Braddles Beal, 71. And Yanni's at 10,300. CJ Miles at 3,500 is a small forward. Paul George at 7,300 and Melo at 8,000. For the power forwards, Nerlens Noel at 4,600, Serge Ibaka at 6,000 and Paul Millsap at 81. And the centers, Chris Felicio at 36, Greggy Munro 57 and Boogie Cousins at 10,700. On DraftKings, Iman Shump at 42, Derrick Rose 57 and John Wall 9,900. At shooting guards, Garrett Temple 42. Dwayne Wade at 7,000 and Jim Butler at 89. At small forward, CJ Miles 37, Melo's at 72, and LeBronald is at 10,200. Shout out to the people who, in their notes for the DFS stuff, when they write down LeBron, they write down LeBronald as well. Power forward, JaMychal Green 4,400, Porzingis at 6,200, and Boogie's at 11. At center, Bill Hernan-Gomez 39, Greggy Munro 53, and Marc Gasol at $8,000. For all you Aussies out there on Moneyball, Matty Dellavedova 37, Dennis Schroeder at 67 and Kemba's at 8-2. At shooting guard, Wayne Ellington 35, Dwayne Wade 69 and Jimmy Harden at 12-3. At small forward, Jeff Green 36, Paul George 73 and Yanni's at 10-5. Power forward, Richaun Holmes 35, Porzingis at 62 and Millsap at 84. And at center, Nerlens Noel's at 45, Greg Munro's at 54 and Marc Gasol's at 85. On DraftStars, TJ McConnell 6,500, Alfred Payton 10,000 and Isaiah Thomas 16,450. Shooting guard, Wayne Ellington, 51. Dwayne Wade, 11.150, and Jim Harden at 21.9. Small forward, Iman Shumpert, 6.450. Dion Waiters is at 89, and Jim Butler's at 17.550. At power forward, David Lee, 6.250. Nerlens Noel at 8.550, and Boogie's at 17.250. And at centre, Bill Hernan-Gomez, 5,000. Gasol's at 12.750, and Paulie Millsap, 15.550. We're done for today's show, guys. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Rajon Rondo.